Welcome, everybody, to another edition of All In with Art Stapleton, a New York Giants podcast brought to you by NorthJersey.com and The Record. I am your host, Art Stapleton, and I am coming to you from the palatial estate of my home and my nicely kept backyard. Figure we gave Justin a Talking Giants the nice greenery in the backdrop last week, so we might as well do it for ourselves here at All In. Props to Paul Wood, our producer extraordinaire, for getting this show going today. We figured we'd give you a little bit of a preview going into the preseason finale tomorrow night, Thursday night, an 8 o'clock start, which is just awful for any of us who want to get this over with and get to the real stories of the regular season, but we have to do it. Amazon Prime Video having the Giants and the Patriots, who will play in the regular season this year, December 1st, Monday night in Foxborough. And will it be Jackson Dart against Drake May, the quarterback that they couldn't get last year, versus the quarterback that they traded back up into the draft, into the first round to get this year? Well, time will tell. Between now and December 1st, the Giants hope to win a lot of games, hope Russell Wilson plays well at quarterback enough to be able to give Jackson Dart the time that he needs, or they believe he needs, to be ready to be a successful QB1 right from when he steps on the field. So today I figured we'd talk a little bit about, we had the assistant coaches yesterday, which I thought, is always interesting. I'll explain to you how that goes. Then we had Brandon Brown after practice. We had an interesting Giants practice during, so let's start there. You can exhale, Giants fans, at least for this part. All of the speculation the last 2 weeks from Cam Skattebo, he's going to start on injured reserve because we haven't seen him in 2 weeks. He re-injured his hamstring. He's got issues with soft tissue problems, all that stuff. He was on the practice field yesterday and was involved in team drills to the point where, it struck me yesterday, it would not shock me to see Cam Skattebo make a cameo tomorrow night and be on the field at MetLife Stadium for the Giants in the preseason finale. I'm not talking a full load, but maybe a couple snaps. They may want to get Skattebo some time here before the regular season kicks off, especially if they feel like they've solved the soft tissue issue. And he was running yesterday, so it did not look like he was encumbered but in any way. So keep an eye on that one. Now, for the bigger two. Andrew Thomas off the physically unable to perform list. He is back. He is on the active list. He is eyeing week 1. I know everybody wants to parse what he talked about yesterday and his tone, and he's not committing to being ready for week 1. Well, here's my take on it. I pay attention, or at least I try to pay attention and try to read the tea leaves when it comes to this administration, this regime here with the Giants, and that's the way they want their leaders to talk. They want Andrew Thomas to not commit to being ready for week 1. So Brian Daboll's perfectly content saying that Andrew Thomas has a lower body injury. And I'm not talking about injuries in the preseason, is what Daboll has said time and again. So we all know, because Andrew Thomas had the surgery to repair his Liz Frank, that he is coming back from that. And that is why he started on the PUP list. But I told you at the beginning of camp that my sense was that they were taking their time. They were being cautious with Andrew Thomas. They were making sure that on the days that he needed to be off his feet, he could be off his feet. On the days where he needed to really dedicate himself to the training staff, he could be in early. He wasn't beholden to the schedule that the rest of the team is held to. When you're on the active roster, you have a certain schedule that you have to be a part of. And for Andrew Thomas, he was not part of that. He was rehabbing. So yesterday was his first day of practice. Obviously, he's a big man. When you're talking about a Liz Frank injury, you want to be careful. You want to be cautious. You don't know how you're going to feel until you really put a full load on it, and a full load in practice, and then you stack days back to back to back, and you see how it's going to take. So this idea that Andrew Thomas wouldn't commit to being on the field in week one, I don't think he's trying to be deceptive in any way, but I think he's just trying to be honest and say, look, I don't know how this is going to feel one day to the next. He only did positional drills yesterday, individual drills, did not do teamwork. But for a guy like Andrew Thomas, and Carmen Brasillo, the offensive line coach, talked about this yesterday. Yes, for most offensive linemen, you want to see them in a game scenario. You want to see them in a practice scenario in training camp. For Andrew Thomas, he might be a little different story. Now, granted, you're going to want to test Andrew Thomas the best you can. But since he didn't participate in training camp and he's not going to practice or be in a preseason game, you're now not going to play Andrew Thomas? I mean, so the reality is when the doctors and when Andrew says, I feel good, I'm ready to go, he's going to go. And I would count on seeing Andrew Thomas at left tackle in week one against Washington until someone tells me otherwise. So that's the Andrew Thomas aspect of this. And then the third one, Malik Nabers. Everyone has been, Malik Nabers is out. What's wrong? Oh, look, all I know is that it wasn't the toe. It wasn't the shoulder. And the reality was that he was just sore. They grinded him pretty good. I mean, Malik did a lot the first 2.5 weeks of training camp. And I think it got to a point where they probably checked out on his GPS medically. They looked at it. He's a little tight. Maybe his back got a little tight. I know that was reported. So that's all above board. And I'm not refuting that. But I really believe that Malik Nabers, at this point, if he were grinding the way he did the first 2 weeks of training camp, we all would be saying, put the guy in bubble wrap, get him ready for Washington. The fact that he was out and we didn't have an answer, at least publicly, from Brian Daboll, and we weren't going to get it, that led to uncertainty. That led to a little bit of panic. What's wrong with Malik? Nothing is wrong with Malik. He was out on the field yesterday. He actually was participating in positional drills on air with no helmet because they were making a helmet switch for him, and they had to get the Guardian cap on, and it was a little bit more intensive work that needed to be done on the helmet. So instead of just standing around and saying, I'm not practicing, Malik jumped into drills and ran a couple routes. This was not a Kadarius Toney situation where he didn't have his shoe on and he decided to do drills barefoot back in rookie minicamp when he was a rookie. But again, Malik Nabers looks good. Spent, I'd say, about 20, 25 minutes after practice working with Russell Wilson, working on their timing, running certain routes. These are guys who are now started to focus on week one and Washington. So those are the three big injuries. A big one that's still not on the field is Deonte Banks. So that's one to keep an eye on. But I think Cordell Flott right now has jumped back in to be CB2 opposite, opposite, as I'm getting alerts here, seeing, I don't need to know who's on TikTok. But as far as where Cordell Flott and the Tay Banks competition lies, I think it's going to be one of those based on every week, who's going to be ahead. And right now, Flott was hurt. Banks took the lead. Now Banks is off the field, and I think Flott has taken the lead. The way Flott played the other night in limited action against the Jets, that big third down pass breakup against Garrett Wilson really got the Giants' attention, and I think it got Flott a little bit of confidence. So I think Flott will end up being the starter with Drew Phillips in the nickel in week one against the Commanders. And we'll go from there. So Tay Banks is an interesting one. Let's see how much longer he's going to be out. All right. So I got my notes. I wanted to talk, I said, about the assistant coach I called it the car wash. And I had a couple of the interns, Sophia, one of the PR interns over at the Giants, asked me, what does car wash mean? And that's essentially when all of the assistant coaches for offense and then for defense are lined up. And as reporters, you need to basically go like through a car wash and go to each individual part of when your car is getting washed. You know, you're working on the tires. Now you're putting, wax on the tires. Then you're cleaning the windows and you're getting the soap applied. For us, it's, hey, there's QB coach Shea Tierney. There's running backs coach Liddell Betts. Tight end coach Tim Kelly. Wide receivers coach Mike Groh. Carm Brasillo is there for the offensive line. And on and on and on. And the same thing happens on the defensive side of the ball. So from our perspective as a reporter, I'm only one person there. We don't have a coverage team here. Our coverage team is behind the scenes. You got Paul Wood here, Dave Rivera, who's our sports editor. He's part of our team. Burt Bainbridge, who's been on the show a little bit, he's part of our team. But as far as being on site, it's me. So what I do as being a veteran is that I know the Giants are going to video the beginning part of probably the higher profile assistants. So I know I'm going to get the beginning of Carm Brasillo and Shea Tierney and most likely Mike Groh. So yesterday I had a couple ideas in mind that I needed to attack, and one of them was Elijah Chatman as a fullback. And that was something that I wanted to do offensively and defensively. And then Jalen Hyatt was involved. And I wanted to talk to Shea Tierney about the quarterbacks, obviously, a little bit of Russell Wilson, who he goes back to NC State with, and obviously wanted to hear a little bit of Jackson Dart. So the funny thing is that when Elijah Chatman started, and check out my column, we posted it today on North Jersey. I had teased it last night that we would post it on Thursday, but to me, it was too good to wait until Thursday. So we posted two long columns today, feature one on Turbo Miller and then one on Elijah Chatman. So check them out. They're two guys who really, I think right now, if the cuts were today, they would be on the 53-man roster, both of them. We'll see how it plays out next Tuesday, and that'll come up. And then we'll have that next Tuesday is the start of officially year 5 of All In with Art Stapleton. We had our first show back on August 26th, and now we've moved ahead to starting year 5. So we'll see what we can do that day as far as shows go. I still don't know what the Giants are doing. They may just have a walkthrough, which means that we won't be in the building. So we'll figure it out. But Paul Wood and I will let you know what we're planning for Tuesday, if we're going to have a show before or after. I'm kind of torn because I don't know if I want to do a podcast in the morning on Tuesday, and then if we don't have all the cuts, then to come back with a reaction pod afterwards. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work for Paul. As I've mentioned before, and I always give Paul credit because he's as much of a part of this show as I am. The reality is that, Paul's only job isn't to produce the All In with Art Stapleton podcast. And my only job is not to host the All In with Art Stapleton podcast. So we've got a lot of other stuff going on. We try to fit as many shows as we can based on timing for you guys, the audience, which continues to grow. We really appreciate the audience that we built audio-wise on all your favorite podcast platforms, but the audience on YouTube continues to build, and we appreciate it. So if you can, drop me a line, whether it's a DM on Instagram or on Twitter, art_Stapleton. Send me an email, stapleton@northjersey.com. Let me know what you prefer. Let me know what you want to see as far as the video portion of the podcast. Do you like going on YouTube? Would you rather have an All In with Art Stapleton page on YouTube to be able to go there to funnel all our copy rather than on the northjersey.com page? I'm interested. Paul's interested to hear your feedback. We want to know what you guys think of where the podcast is and how we're moving forward into this next chapter, year 5. long time to do the podcast, but we feel like we really hit our stride and moving forward. But we will also want to give a product that you guys enjoy too. So I think that's important. So that assistant coach car wash, interesting. Elijah Chatman. Originally we thought, well, if he's in with the fullbacks, that he would be with the running backs. So we went to Liddell Betts. I wanted to talk to Liddell Betts about Tyrone Tracy, wanted to talk to him about Turbo Miller. And Ryan Dunleavy from the Post asked him about Elijah Chatman being in his room. And what we found out was that no, Chatman is not in the running backs room. The fullbacks, since they don't necessarily have a fullback per se, a full-time fullback, are with Tim Kelly and the tight ends room, which makes some sense if you start thinking about it. Daniel Bellinger does a lot of H-back. He's in the room with TK. So why wouldn't the fullbacks be with the tight ends? You know, they're trying to marry the schemes, the run schemes, and the fits. So Chatman, when he's been with the offense in meetings, it's been with Tim Kelly and the running back, and the tight ends. So what did I do? I went to Tim Kelly, talked to him about having Chatman, and it's an interesting story. You can read more about it on northjersey.com, but, you know, Chatman came here as a long shot a year ago. I mean, he was a tryout at rookie minicamp. I mean, the week before he had tried out for the Seattle Seahawks, and they basically told him he was too small. He couldn't play at this level. So Andre Patterson's belief in Chatman as a defensive lineman and thought he could have ultimately develop into a key cog in whether that was against the run or a pass rush specialist, which is what he was last year. And I think Chatman has grown to the point where I think you're going to see him more in early down situations. You know, he had a great play against the Jets in the game, the play that Abdul Carter wiped out Simpson, the guard, and another offensive lineman that was pulling. Chatman basically ghosted the tackle and was there to make the play as well. So I thought what was interesting about Chatman is that the Giants, they knew that he was a 1,600-yard back in high school. And then when he got to college at SMU, he did some work at fullback. But college is a little different than the pros. So last year they didn't put it on his plate. But now this year, in the spring, they talked about it. And Brian Dable was the first one to go up to Chatman in the locker room and say, hey, what do you think about doing some fullback this spring so we could see what it looks like? And behind the scenes, Chatman didn't realize, but the coaches started talking about it. And the coaches were like, okay, let's see what we've got in the spring and if it's worth it to do it in the summer. And the reason why they had to ask that question, and Tim Kelly told me, and then Andre Patterson backed him up, said, look, the reality is that, you know, when you're doing this for a player and you're moving them back and forth, and I know everybody wants to talk about, oh, Travis Hunter, look what he's doing, but he's taken in training camp, as far as I understand it, until he got hurt, he was doing a day where he was strictly a wide receiver and then a day where he was strictly a corner. For Chatman, since he's not necessarily in the full-time position on offense, they had to basically look at their scripts every day and say, okay, offense, when do you want to run some schemes with Chatman at fullback? Because then you have to match it up with what was going on defensively and what period they were going to have. And I think what's interesting is that I saw it last week in the joint practice against the Jets, the one at Florham Park, because they were practicing on two separate fields, but they were the parallel fields. As we told you, it's the Giants defense against the Jets offense, and then the Giants offense against the Jets defense. At one point, I saw number 94 sprinting from the main field where the defense was to the side field where the offense was. And it was Elijah Chatman, because when they were starting a team drill period, they had it scripted out where they wanted to work on the run game and they wanted Chatman at fullback to work with Tyrone Tracy, Devin Singletary. And the only issue was that the second and third team defense was up at the same time on the adjacent field. So Chatman sprinted over, was in the offensive huddle, got the play, ran as fullback, Tracy got, I think it was about a 12-yard gain, which was a nice play. And then Chatman, right out of the huddle, sprinting back over to the main field to take his usual spot as defensive lineman with the second and third team. So it's a lot to be putting on a plate of not just the player, but the assistant coaches, the teammates, because if you miss a beat, all of a sudden now the last thing you want is players calling for another sub to get in because Chat is already on the offense and vice versa. So I thought that was just an interesting behind the scenes setup for that column and that story on Elijah Chatman. So hope you guys enjoy the column. I know he's a very popular player from last summer. Certainly should be a popular player again. And I had fun reporting it and just finding out, that level of commitment that they've made to just give him a shot. And I think Chatman will be on the 53, and I think in certain circumstances when it calls for a fullback, I think Chatman will end up on the field. So another thing I tweeted out last night, but I wanted to talk about on the podcast, is when I was talking to Andre Patterson, and the All-In audience knows I have a lot of respect for Andre Patterson. So do the Giants. He's one of the most respected defensive line coaches in the entire league. His resume and pedigree speaks for itself. The guys that he's coached through the years, the guys he's coached here. I mean, you're talking about from a John Randall who's in the Hall of Fame to a Dexter Lawrence who is on that trajectory right now. And I think when I went to Patterson, and I have a comfort level with him now, I could pretty much talk to him about things that we were thinking. And I said to him, so did you always know who he ended up coaching, this player? Roy Robertson Harris. He coached him in college. And I said to Dre, I haven't seen this player in practice, the player that I saw in Buffalo for the preseason game, and then obviously in the game against the Jets. I said, does he flip a switch? And Dre Patterson said, no. He goes, you guys are seeing it wrong. And I was like, okay, well, explain to me then. What do I see? And it wasn't in a nasty way. It was really in an enlightening way. And Patterson basically told me that the way Roy Robertson Harris plays, he's a power player. He plays with length, and he plays against the run. In practice, he can't play the way he plays in games because anytime he wants to use his length and power and drive, he's got to pull back because you're not supposed to hit your own players. And even in joint practices, you're not supposed to do that. So the fun thing was, he said when Roy Robertson Harris got into the preseason, everybody all of a sudden is seeing this player and go, wow, where did it come from? He obviously was loafing in practice, or he takes it to another gear. What Patterson told me, he said, no, he doesn't have another gear. He just has to dial back in practice. And that's the big difference. So when you start thinking about it in those terms, when you're assessing practice, I think that says a lot for maybe we should be looking at practice a little bit through a different lens, because anytime you saw Roy Robertson Harris kind of get pulled back and the offensive lineman kind of get some leverage on him, a lot of times, according to Dre Patterson, that was Roy Robertson Harris kind of laying back because that's the way he's supposed to protect his teammate. So just thought an interesting nugget. I thought you guys would appreciate it. I put it out there on Twitter yesterday, but I know there isn't complete crossover from the podcast to Twitter, so wanted to share it here. So that was that. I'm trying to think of anybody else. I'm checking my notes on my phone to see. Elijah Chatman wanted us to know that he's only broken 2 face masks at fullback so far this summer. So Brian Dable maybe exaggerated a little bit about all these broken face masks, but the fact that he's already broken 2 face masks says a lot about the force that he wants to create at fullback. So that's where we're at for that. Tomorrow night, make sure you check out our post-game podcast. Paul and I will put together a post-game all-in for the happenings to close the book on the preseason after the game tomorrow night. Here's what I think. I don't think we're going to see many starters. I think you're going to see Jackson Dart start the game. I think you may see Cam Skattebo on the field. I think you're going to see Jalen Hyatt. I think you'll see Evan Neal. But I think for the most part, the starters are now gearing up for week 1 of the regular season. So will I be shocked if all of a sudden Brian Daboll keeps the same philosophy and approach that he did the first 2 games? I won't be shocked, but I will be a little surprised. I think on a short week, you worked your starters into the middle of the second quarter in Saturday night's game, I think with the idea that you're not going to be putting them out there in the preseason finale against the Patriots. So that's where we're at. So hope you guys enjoyed kind of the preview podcast for this week. We're working on getting some guests back in the fold. Sometimes the schedule is a little difficult. I think we'll end up having Phil Simms at some point. I think Phil's perspective on Russell Wilson and Jackson Dart and even Jameis Winston, I think would be really good. So Phil, I think, is going to join us before the start of the season. We had talked about getting Jerry Ferrara, big New York sports fan of Entourage fame. He was going to come on at some point before the season. I think we'll still get him. So we'll see. We'll see. And then we still got some players that have said that they will come on the show. So we'll work through that over the next couple weeks. But that's where we're at. I will be at MetLife tomorrow. Make sure you check out all of the arrival videos and everything that I can bring you from outside the Giants locker room, starting probably around 4 o'clock tomorrow. That would be my guess when players start showing up. Got to try to beat Russell Wilson to the stadium. You beat us last time, so I'll do my best to get there. I post those videos up on TikTok first. It's just Art Stapleton across on TikTok. You can check out those videos, and then I'll put what I consider the fun ones or the most noteworthy ones up on Twitter and Instagram as we go. So again, for Paul Wood, I'm Art Stapleton. We appreciate you being all in. We're all in as well, and we will be back all in at MetLife Stadium tomorrow night after the preseason finale, and we'll start looking ahead to where they're at, where the New York Giants are at. September 7th, Washington, Jaden Daniels and the Commanders. It's going to be fun.